Welcome to Kunzy Podcast English, where everyday stories are told in English with authenticity and emotion. Today, you'll hear a surprising and heartfelt story. Mera, a dedicated nurse, fell in love with a married man. But can love overcome the boundaries of truth? What will she choose when faced with the most painful and difficult crossroads of her life? Join us to discover Mera's journey, a story not just about love, but about choices and the strength within each of us. Have you ever felt like your life was quietly passing by, as if you weren't really present in it? Each day repeats itself mechanically. Wake up, go to work, eat a simple dinner, then drift into a dreamless sleep. Day after day, nothing changes. Nothing makes you feel alive, only that you're existing. That was the world Mera lived in, a 30-year-old nurse working at a city hospital. She had no boyfriend, no close group of friends to meet for coffee on weekends, and no one waiting for her after her shifts. Mera wasn't the type of person you'd notice if you passed her on the street. She dressed simply. Her face often carried a trace of exhaustion after long night shifts. But in her eyes, there was a faint light, the light of quiet resilience and compassion. She loved her job, loved the feeling of knowing she was helping save someone's life, even if it was just giving an injection or holding a patient's hand during a panic. To others, it was hard work. But to Mera, it was the only reason she kept going. After work, while most people stopped by a supermarket or cafe, Mera would take a bus back to a small village on the outskirts of the city, where her elderly mother lived alone in an old house. A few times a week, she would visit, cook a simple meal for her, listen to her stories, and then return to the city when it was already dark. No one knew that after taking care of dozens of patients every day, the same young nurse quietly continued to be a devoted daughter in the fading light of another long day. Her life was peaceful, but hollow. There was no noise, no drama, no turmoil, but also no joy, bright enough to be remembered. Each time she returned to her small rented room, Mera would sit silently on her old chair, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Thoughts drifted in like an unnamed storm. She often wondered, was she truly living her life at 30? Was she missing out on something important? A love, an opportunity, or simply her youth? Then one rainy afternoon, just like countless others, something changed. Perhaps it was a fleeting eye contact with a stranger, or maybe it was a simple question from an old patient. "Are you happy, dear?" That question hit her like an arrow straight to the chest. For the first time in a very long while, Mera felt truly seen, not as a nurse, but as a human being, quietly aching for something to believe in, to love, and to finally start living differently. Mera's life continued to move in quiet, predictable rhythms. But one day, like a breeze stirring still waters, everything changed. That breeze carried the name Michael. He appeared on an ordinary Monday morning, the kind of morning when most people were still drowsy from the weekend, dragging their feet into work. But that day felt different. The air inside the hospital ward seemed lighter, brighter. Every glance slowly turned toward one direction. The tall man walking down the hallway, with tousled brown hair and ocean blue eyes. Michael, the new resident doctor, transferred from a prestigious city hospital. He was 31 years old, yet carried a charm that was both youthful and quietly mature. From that very first morning, he brought a new energy to the hospital. He wasn't just movie star handsome, though that was hard to ignore. He had a way about him, warm and unassuming. He knelt down to speak to elderly patients with gentle eyes, always listening carefully, often smiling softly as they spoke. He never barked orders at the nurses. Instead, it was always, please, and thank you, as if kindness was second nature to him. It was no surprise that every nurse, married or single, found themselves drawn into Michael's orbit. The staff room buzzed a little more whenever he walked in. Lunchboxes were packed more carefully. Makeup became a bit more refined. And in the middle of all that, Mera quietly stepped back, as if behind an invisible wall of glass. She watched Michael from a distance, a fleeting glance, like wind passing over an open field. She didn't believe someone like him would ever notice someone like her. In the mirror, she only saw a 30-year-old woman with tired eyes from sleepless nights, hair always tied up hastily, wearing a faded white coat that had lost its shine over time. She knew she wasn't the charming type, didn't have witty banter, didn't know how to smile flirtatiously like the younger nurses. In her mind, she thought, he's so handsome, so well-mannered. He belongs to a world full of light, and I'm just someone passing through. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that at some unnoticed moment, those deep blue eyes had paused too. They'd paused at the corner of the room where she was quietly checking a patient's blood pressure. Just a glance. But it was enough for Michael to remember her. The small-framed woman who never raised her voice, never sought attention, but worked with a quiet strength that he couldn't look away from. And that was when the story began to change direction. A direction Mera had never dared to imagine. From those brief encounters, Michael began to pay more attention to Mera. It wasn't loud or obvious. Just small things, a morning greeting, a gentle smile during a hectic shift, or a quiet glance as she passed down the hospital hallway. At first, Mera thought she was imagining it. He's just being polite to everyone, she told herself, trying to dismiss the flutter in her chest. But then, those signs became clearer. One evening after work, while she was fumbling for her keys, Michael approached and softly offered, "Let me drive you home. It looks like it's going to rain." Mera hesitated, but there was no pity in his eyes, only sincerity and warmth. In the car, they talked endlessly about work, memorable patients, and even her favorite foods. She hadn't expected the conversation to feel so easy. The invisible walls between them seemed to melt away in those simple exchanges. After that day, him giving her a ride home was no longer coincidence. He started showing up at just the right time, like he knew her schedule by heart. Sometimes, he brought her a cup of hot ginger tea. "Because I noticed you coughed a bit yesterday." Other times, it was coffee made just the way she liked it. Mera didn't tell anyone, not her colleagues, not even her mother. But deep inside, something was changing. A new rhythm pulsed in her heart. That long-forgotten feeling of looking forward to seeing someone, even if just for a few minutes each day. In the hospital cafeteria, if Michael walked past her table, he'd stop and ask, "Have you eaten?" Then he'd sit down and maybe even offer her a piece of grilled fish. Their conversations grew deeper. He didn't just care about her health. He listened when she talked about her aging mother, about the days she felt so exhausted she'd cry alone in the break room. Mera slowly realized she was starting to like him. Not because of his handsome face, not because of the thoughtful little things he brought, but because of the way he saw her, truly saw her, in a world where she had gotten used to feeling invisible. And then, every morning when she woke up, the first thing that came to mind was no longer the long shifts ahead, but rather, will I see him today? A heart long closed was beginning to open again. But was she dreaming in daylight? Or was there something behind those blue eyes that she still hadn't uncovered? The first date and the shock. That weekend, Mera chose a light blue dress she only wore on special occasions. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was enough to make her feel a little more beautiful. Her heart raced when Michael texted to say he was already waiting outside the movie theater. She glanced at the mirror once more, adjusted her hair, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she felt nervous, like a girl going on her very first date. When she arrived, Michael was already there, smiling warmly with 2 movie tickets in hand. "You're here," he said, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. They chose a gentle film, not too dramatic, not too loud. In the dim theater, Mera couldn't concentrate on the movie. Her heart was busy dancing with unfamiliar emotions. Her hands trembled slightly when Michael handed her a bag of popcorn, and their eyes met for a brief but electric moment. After the film, instead of saying goodbye like they usually did, Michael invited her to take a walk. They strolled side by side along a quiet street under the golden glow of streetlights. The air was cool, as if the universe was blessing their evening. They talked about childhood, work, and unfulfilled dreams. Mera spoke about her late father and her mother, who lived alone in the countryside. Michael listened with the kind of attentiveness no one had ever offered her before. He shared that he once dreamed of being a musician, but chose medicine because his family expected it. There was a trace of regret in his voice, but also a sense of acceptance. Mera realized that behind Michael's strong, confident exterior was a man full of depth and emotion. She felt lucky, truly lucky, to be someone he could open up to. The more they talked, the more it felt like they had known each other forever, like 2 lonely souls had finally found an echo in one another. When he dropped her off at her house, Michael looked at her for a long moment, saying nothing. Neither did she. But in that silence, something had begun. Something fragile, undefined, but enough to make their hearts quietly flutter. That night, Mera lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. She kept replaying every glance, every smile, every word. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem so bleak. Then just a few days later, everything took an unexpected turn. One quiet afternoon at the hospital, while they were sipping tea in the break room, Michael looked at her with a strange expression. Not the clear, warm gaze she was used to, but something heavier. He spoke softly, so softly, as if saying it aloud might break the world. "There's something I need to tell you, Mera." Her heart clenched. She looked at him, sensing the tension in his breath. "I'm married." The words dropped like thunder from a clear sky. Mera froze. He continued, "Her name is Laura. We've been married for 2 years, but we're not happy." Mera said nothing. She just listened, holding her tea tightly to keep her hands from trembling. Michael explained that he and his wife lived almost separate lives. They barely spoke, rarely shared moments, and hardly ever ate together. "She's a good person," he said, "but we've lost all connection." Then he looked straight into Mera's eyes. "Only when I'm with you do I feel like myself." His words were sweet, but they cut deep. Beautiful and painful all at once. Mera didn't know how to respond. It felt like she'd been swept into a storm. She had just opened her heart, just started to hope. And now everything turned into a giant question mark. She wanted to be angry, to shout at him. But when she saw the sadness in his eyes, she couldn't hate him. All she saw was a man trapped in his own life. That night, Mera sat alone in her small room, her face lit by the warm yellow glow of the lamp. She felt like she had just fallen off a cloud. Her emotions were torn between affection and betrayal, between empathy and heartbreak. She asked herself, should I walk away or follow my heart? That question looped in her mind like a wordless melody that refused to let her sleep. The next day, everything at the hospital went on as if nothing had happened. But for Mera, nothing was the same. She began to look at Michael differently. He was still the kind, gentle man who made her heart race. But now, he was a married man, a man who could never truly be hers. Not now, maybe not ever. And yet it didn't end there, because Michael still cared. And Mera, though she wanted to walk away, found herself falling deeper. She knew the path ahead was dangerous. But the heart doesn't always obey the mind. Mera's confusion and the truth revealed. Mera was confused, unsure whether to move forward or walk away. She felt lost in a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to believe that Michael truly liked her, that what they shared wasn't just fleeting. But another part of her warned that she was stepping into forbidden territory, where things easily break and leave behind heartache. She was torn between reason and feelings, uncertain which path was right. One day at the supermarket, she unexpectedly saw Michael with his wife, Laura. The sight hit her like a slap to the fragile hope she had been clinging to. Mera froze in place, her hand tightening around the handle of her basket. She wanted to look away, but her eyes were locked on the scene ahead. Michael didn't notice her at all. He was fully engaged, listening to Laura and laughing with ease. Laura was stunning, tall, graceful, and elegant like a fashion model. She wore a beige dress that flowed with each step, her soft curls cascading down her back and her heels adding poise to her stride. It was nothing like the cold, distant image Michael had once painted. Laura looked lively, gentle, and, most heartbreakingly, happy. The two of them stood together like a picture-perfect couple from a magazine cover. They laughed and chatted joyfully, and Mera, deeply hurt, quietly walked out of the supermarket. Neither Michael nor Laura noticed the sorrowful gaze watching them from afar. Mera moved quickly toward the exit, the afternoon breeze tossing her hair and fluttering the light scarf around her shoulders. Her heart pounded in her chest, overwhelmed with both pain and shame. She felt small and foolish, like a nameless side character in a story she once thought was a miracle. She didn't stop at the supermarket entrance. She kept walking, as if her feet needed to stay in motion so the tears wouldn't fall before she found somewhere to hide. She didn't want to be the woman who got in the way of someone else's happiness. But even more painfully, she realized she had never truly held an important place in Michael's heart. She had only been a comforting pause in his life, never a choice he was willing to embrace in the light. That night, Mera lay wide awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as if searching for answers in the darkness. Sleep eluded her completely. The image of Michael and Laura replayed over and over in her mind like a film stuck on loop. Every time she recalled their laughter and closeness, it felt like a silent blade slicing into her heart, slow, persistent, and deeply painful. She had never imagined finding herself in such a complicated and hurtful situation. She thought back to the times Michael drove her home, the way he looked at her when handing her a morning coffee, the softness in his voice when he asked if she'd eaten. She wanted to believe it had all been real. But what she saw at the supermarket had hit her like a cold wave, drowning her fragile hope. She wasn't just doubting Michael now. She was questioning her own feelings. Had she misunderstood everything? The next morning, long before the sun had risen, Mera was already out of bed. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her face looked exhausted, eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. Yet within them burned a quiet determination. Today, she would confront Michael. She couldn't keep floating in uncertainty, entangled in half-truths and unspoken emotions. She needed clarity, not to hold on, but to let go with peace. At the hospital, time seemed to slow when she saw Michael walk into the break room. He looked the same, kind, gentle, carrying that same warm smile, as if nothing had happened, as if the supermarket hadn't happened. Mera walked toward him, her voice calm but firm. "Michael, I need to talk." He paused, slightly surprised, but nodded. Together, they stepped out into the hallway, away from curious eyes. Mera looked directly into his eyes, unwavering. "Yesterday, I saw you with your wife at the supermarket." A thick silence settled between them. Michael didn't speak at first. Then he sighed and looked down at the floor. "I knew this day would come," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I wasn't clearer from the beginning." But Mera wasn't looking for an apology. She needed the truth. "You said you weren't happy," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But I saw you both smiling like you were in love." Michael looked up, tiredness in his expression. "Laura and I, we're strangers living in the same house," he admitted. "We've been drifting apart for years. We hardly talk. There's no connection. What you saw yesterday was just a performance for the outside world." He paused, then added, "I didn't go looking for anything, but when I met you, I felt alive again. Every day I saw you, every conversation, every smile, it brought me peace. It made me feel like I was human again." Mera stood still, his words echoing in her heart. A part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she wasn't just an escape. But her mind reminded her that emotions, no matter how powerful, don't always equal truth. "I need time to think," she said slowly. "I need distance, Michael, not because I don't have feelings, but because I refuse to be the other woman in someone else's life. Whether your marriage is real or broken, the fact is, it still exists. And I can't love someone in the shadows." Michael nodded, his eyes clouded. He didn't try to stop her. He didn't beg. Maybe he understood. Maybe he knew that the only way to truly respect her now was to let her go. Mera turned away, her steps heavy but resolute. She didn't cry. For the first time in days, she felt a strange lightness in her chest. She was still hurting, but now she had chosen to protect herself. That day, Mera returned to her work like usual, but something within her had shifted. She was no longer the woman who clung to unspoken hopes. She had learned how to pause, how to draw a line, how to protect her heart. Most importantly, she had learned that love, if it's not brave and clear, will always remain just a half-finished dream. Advice from a best friend and the final choice. Eventually, Mera decided to confide everything to Sarah, her best friend since university. They met one rainy afternoon at their usual cafe, 2 steaming lattes in hand. Mera sat in silence for a while before slowly recounting everything that had happened. The conversations with Michael, the rides home, the thoughtful coffees, and the heartbreak of seeing him with his wife at the supermarket. Sarah didn't interrupt. She listened intently, her eyes full of empathy. When Mera finished, Sarah reached across the table, took her hand, and looked at her seriously. "Mera, You deserve someone who gives you their whole heart and life, she said firmly. Not just broken pieces from a man who can't even face his own reality. You're an incredible person. Don't let yourself get swept into a story where the ending is already written, and it's not for you. Those words struck something deep in Mera. She knew Sarah was right. Her feelings for Michael were genuine, but so was the fact that he was still married, no matter how unhappy he claimed to be. And she didn't want to be the reason a marriage broke down, especially not emotionally. A week later, on a rare golden afternoon in autumn, Michael called. He wanted to meet her at the park, the same one where they had once spontaneously walked together after a long shift. Mera hesitated, then agreed. She needed to bring closure to this chapter. Clear, honest, and without lingering doubts. When she arrived, Michael was already there, standing under a tall oak tree. He looked tired, sadder than usual, but still smiled when he saw her. A strained, hopeful smile. They sat on a bench nearby, with only the rustling of leaves and distant laughter of children as their background. Michael spoke first. He told her he had been thinking constantly over the past week. He admitted he had been selfish for drawing her into something so complicated. He apologized again for not being honest from the start, but he also confessed that the feelings he had for her were real, and still are. Mera listened quietly, her heart softening, but her mind sharper than ever. She replied gently, "I don't doubt your feelings. But I can't go on like this. I don't want to be the person who comes between a husband and wife, no matter how distant they are. I want a love that starts with clarity, not with someone else's pain." She looked straight into his eyes, no longer avoiding, no longer hoping. You need to decide what you want from your life. If you're truly unhappy, then change for yourself. Not for me or anyone else. But as for me, I have to walk away. I need to protect my heart. Michael said nothing. Perhaps deep down, he knew she was right, that she deserved something whole, something certain. They sat quietly for a while, letting time pass like a wordless farewell. When Mera stood to leave, the autumn breeze brushed her hair. It carried a hint of sadness, but also something liberating. She didn't know what the future held, or if she would ever see Michael again, but she knew she had made the right decision. In a world full of uncertainty, at least she was certain about her own worth. On the way home, she texted Sarah, "Thank you for reminding me that I deserve more." Sarah replied with a single red heart emoji and, "I've always believed in you." And Mera, for the first time in weeks, smiled. A real smile. No more in-betweens, no more waiting. She had chosen herself. And that was the beginning of everything good that would come next. Life is full of crossroads. Some paths seem to lead us to happiness, but the further we go, the more lost we feel. There are moments that stir our hearts intensely, yet those same moments leave deep scars. And then one day, we must choose. Not between right and wrong, but between continuing to sacrifice for something uncertain or stepping back to protect our own peace. Mera's story isn't just about an unfulfilled love. It's a reflection of many of us, those who have loved, dreamed, hoped, and hurt. When Michael appeared, he lit up her world. Through every glance, every smile, every quiet cup of coffee, Mera felt seen. After so many years of loneliness, his presence seemed like the answer to a silent longing in her heart. But life, as always, isn't that simple. The shocking truth that Michael was already married threw Mera into a storm of emotions. Her heart urged her to love, while her mind screamed, "Stop." The moment she saw him laughing happily with his elegant wife, Mera understood. She was never truly part of that relationship. Even if Michael was unhappy in his marriage, he was still bound by a vow, a commitment. So what was Mera to do? Should she continue loving him, hoping he might one day leave that marriage? Or should she walk away, even though her heart ached? The answer came from deep within her, and it's the greatest lesson for all of us. To love is to accept, but to love is also to know when to walk away from something not meant for us. Mera chose to walk away, not because she didn't love him enough, but because she knew love shouldn't begin in halves. The person who deserves her should be someone who can hold her hand in the daylight, not someone who hides her in the shadows. He should be free, ready to stand beside her without any lingering ties. And from that moment on, Mera began to love herself more. She realized that true love doesn't ask you to sacrifice your worth to keep someone. We don't need love stories like in the movies if they come at the cost of our dignity, our self-worth, and our inner peace. Dear listener, if you find yourself in a situation like Mera's, ask yourself, is this person truly meant for me? Or am I just a side chapter in their main story? And if the answer hurts, be brave enough to leave. Because real love doesn't hurt you, it heals you. True love makes you feel safe, whole, and never has you fighting for your place in someone's life. Life is a long journey. Don't let yourself be trapped at a dead end just because you're afraid of being alone. Loneliness in peace is better than being with someone who forces you to hide your true feelings. Choose what's right, not what's easy. Choose what you need, not just what you want, because in the end, you only have one life. Don't live it for someone else. Live it for yourself. And if Mera's story touched your heart, if you're looking for a space to listen, to feel, to heal through stories like this, stay with Kunzy Podcast English. Please like if you found today's message meaningful. Share to spread this lesson to others who may be facing the same inner struggle. And don't forget to subscribe to Kunzy Podcast English, where we tell heartfelt stories with emotion and sincerity to help you learn English and learn to love yourself the right way. Kunzy Podcast English. Learn English through healing stories. See you in the next episode.